July 21st, 1873. A warm summer night near Adair, Iowa. A train bound for St. Louis was thundering down the tracks, loaded with passengers, valuables, and strong boxes of gold. But on this night, the train would never reach its destination. Waiting in the shadows was Jesse James and his gang, a ruthless band of outlaws whose names would soon echo across the West. What happened that night was more than just a robbery. It was the first successful train heist in American history. Until then, trains were considered untouchable, iron beasts carrying fortunes under the watch of armed guards. But Jesse James proved otherwise. With masks, revolvers, and explosives, he and his men stopped the Rock Island train, terrorized its crew, and vanished with thousands in gold and cash. The heist shocked the nation. Some called Jesse a villain. Others called him a hero, a modern-day Robin Hood, standing against the railroads and banks. Either way, he became a legend. This is the story of how Jesse James turned a dusty Missouri outlaw gang into American folklore, with one daring train heist that changed the Old West forever. Jesse James wasn't born an outlaw. Raised in Missouri during the Civil War, he grew up in a divided land, half Union, half Confederate. As a teenager, Jesse and his older brother Frank joined Confederate guerrilla fighters, riding with bloody bands like Quantrill's Raiders. The war hardened him. He learned to shoot from horseback, strike quickly, and disappear just as fast. By the war's end, Jesse was only 20 years old, but already carried the scars and instincts of a veteran fighter. Peace didn't suit him. The post-war South was broken, and Jesse saw opportunity in chaos. He and Frank gathered men like Cole Younger, Jim Cummins, and Clell Miller, fighters turned bandits. Together, they formed the James Younger Gang. At first, they robbed banks in broad daylight. They stormed in with pistols drawn, emptying safes, while townsfolk watched helplessly. These robberies brought in cash, but more importantly, they gave Jesse something he craved: notoriety. But Jesse was never satisfied. Banks were one thing. He wanted something bolder, something no outlaw had dared before. And in 1873, he saw his chance. The expanding railroads carried more wealth than any bank. And unlike small-town vaults, they couldn't lock their doors. The trains were moving targets, fast, dangerous, but vulnerable if you knew where to strike. Jesse James had found his stage. By summer 1873, Jesse James was ready to change history. He and his gang had their eyes on the Rock Island train line, which carried gold shipments for eastern banks. The plan was simple in concept, but dangerous in execution. Stop the train, overpower the crew, blow the safe, and ride off before reinforcements arrived. Jesse chose his men carefully. Frank James, steady and calculating, would keep the gang organized. The younger brothers, Cole, Jim, and Bob, were fierce fighters. Alongside them rode Clell Miller, Jim Cummins, and a handful of other trusted outlaws. They studied the line near Adair, Iowa, where the tracks curved and slowed. Perfect ambush territory. The gang prepared tools, crowbars, hammers, and even a length of rail they could remove to derail the train. Their pistols were polished, their rifles loaded, and their masks ready. For Jesse, this wasn't just about money. It was about making a statement. Banks and railroads were hated symbols of power in the South. By robbing a train, Jesse could elevate himself from outlaw to folk hero, a man striking back at northern wealth. The stage was set. On July 21st, the James Younger Gang rode into the night, preparing to etch their names into legend. The gang arrived near Adair just before midnight. Lanterns were extinguished, horses tied in the woods. Working quickly, they loosened a section of track, bending it out of place. Then they hid in the brush, waiting for the Rock Island train. Moments later, The sound of steel and thunder filled the air. The train approached, its headlight cutting through the darkness. As it rounded the bend, the engine struck the broken rail and lurched violently. The locomotive toppled off the track, tumbling into the dirt. The impact killed the engineer instantly and left the crew stunned. Before the passengers could react, Jesse and his men swarmed the cars, pistols in hand, bandanas over their faces. They shouted orders for everyone to stay down. The gang fired warning shots into the air, striking terror into the hearts of the passengers. Women screamed, men cowered, and the outlaws stormed toward the express car. Inside was the real prize, the strongbox filled with gold, silver, and cash shipments. Using tools, they forced it open and stuffed the loot into sacks. Within minutes, they had thousands of dollars. But Jesse wasn't satisfied. He ordered his men to strip passengers of valuables, watches, wallets, and jewelry. By the time they were done, the gang had seized the equivalent of nearly $3 million in today's money. Then, as fast as they appeared, they were gone, vanishing into the Missouri night. The James Younger gang knew speed was everything. Once the train was derailed, telegraph wires would spread news of the robbery within hours. The posse would soon be on their trail, with saddlebags bulging with cash and gold. Jesse led his men back into the dense Missouri woods. They rode hard, changing horses at prearranged farms, sympathetic to ex-Confederates. The gang's reputation preceded them. Many in the South still saw them as rebels fighting Northern oppression. Farmers offered food, shelter, and silence. Meanwhile, chaos reigned on the tracks. Survivors scrambled to aid the wounded. The wrecked locomotive lay smoking in the dirt. Authorities quickly organized posses, but tracking a dozen skilled riders through dense terrain was nearly impossible. Jesse's tactics were simple. Split the group into smaller units, regroup later at a safe house, and move the loot to hidden caches. They buried some in farm fields, stashed others in caves. Only Jesse knew every location. Within days, the gang had vanished. To the railroad companies and lawmen, it was infuriating. To the public, it was mesmerizing. Newspapers splashed headlines about the daring train robbery. Jesse James had done it. He had pulled off the first great American train heist and gotten away. Flush with cash, the James Younger gang wasted no time enjoying their spoils. They bought new horses, fine clothes, and spent freely in saloons. Jesse himself reveled in the attention. He wasn't just an outlaw, he was a celebrity. In towns sympathetic to the South, people whispered about him as a Robin Hood figure. Stories spread that Jesse gave money to poor farmers, though in truth, most of the loot stayed in the gang's pockets. But myths spread faster than facts, and Jesse didn't stop them. The gang grew bold. They robbed more banks, trains, and stagecoaches. Each heist added to their fortune and their notoriety. The Missouri train robbery had set the stage for a reign of terror that lasted years. But money and fame came at a price. With each crime, lawmen, Pinkerton detectives, and bounty hunters closed in tighter. The gang lived in luxury one week, then hid in barns the next. Jesse thrived on the thrill, but cracks within the gang were starting to show. Not all members wanted the attention Jesse craved. Some just wanted the money and peace. Others worried about the growing violence. Still, for now, Jesse James was untouchable. He had written his name in blood and gold across the Midwest. The Rock Island train heist embarrassed the railroads and enraged law enforcement. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency, America's first private detectives, was hired to bring Jesse and his gang to justice. The Pinkertons used everything at their disposal: undercover agents, informants, and relentless pursuit. They tracked leads across Missouri, Kansas, and even Texas. But Jesse always seemed one step ahead. His network of Southern sympathizers gave him shelter, food, and warnings whenever lawmen got close. The Pinkertons struck back brutally. In 1875, they raided the James family farm in Missouri. A bomb thrown into the house killed Jesse's younger half-brother and maimed his mother, Zerelda. The attack backfired. Instead of breaking Jesse, it turned him into a folk hero. Newspapers portrayed him as a victim of Northern cruelty, fueling public sympathy. The law was closing in, but Jesse James wasn't ready to surrender. If anything, the pressure only made him more daring. The Missouri train heist had made Jesse famous, but now fame made him a target. Every robbery after carried greater risks. By the late 1870s, the James Younger gang was splintering. Failed robberies, deaths, and arrests had weakened them. Jesse pressed on, forming smaller bands of loyalists, but paranoia was eating him alive. Jesse no longer trusted easily. Every man in his gang was a potential traitor, every ally a possible spy. Still, he planned more robberies, always chasing the thrill, always needing more. His downfall came not from lawmen, but from betrayal within. In 1882, two members of his gang, Robert and Charles Ford, were recruited by Missouri's governor. They were promised pardons if they brought Jesse James down. On April 3, 1882, Jesse relaxed at home in St. Joseph, Missouri. With his wife and children nearby, he removed his guns and turned to adjust a picture on the wall. In that moment, Robert Ford pulled his revolver and fired a single shot into the back of Jesse's head. The legendary outlaw was dead at just 34 years old. The man who had pulled off the first great train heist was betrayed not by lawmen, but by one of his own. The Missouri train heist of 1873 cemented Jesse James's place in history. It wasn't just a robbery, it was the moment America's romance with outlaws truly began. Jesse became a legend, his name whispered in saloons, printed in newspapers, and eventually immortalized in dime novels. To some, he was a cold-blooded killer. To others, a Robin Hood striking back at corrupt banks and railroads. The truth lay somewhere in between. The heist inspired countless imitators. Train robberies spread across the West, from Butch Cassidy to the Wild Bunch. Jesse had proven it could be done, and others followed. For the railroads, it was a wake-up call. They increased security, armored express cars, and armed guards rode shotgun. Yet the legend of the invincible outlaw was already etched into the American imagination. Though Jesse died young, his myth only grew. Songs were written, ballads sung, and later movies made. The boy from Missouri who turned to banditry during the Civil War had become an icon of rebellion. The Missouri train heist wasn't just the beginning of Jesse James's fame, it was the birth of a legend. The Missouri train heist of 1873 wasn't just a robbery, it was the spark that ignited Jesse James's legend. A crime that turned a farm boy into one of history's most infamous outlaws. But in the end, betrayal, greed, and violence caught up with him. As it always does, the trains he robbed moved on. But the story of Jesse James remains forever etched in American folklore. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true crime history.